so much to talk about today, so let me try to be efficient with my time. The buzzword that you hear from every supervisor is affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing. The county executive held a housing forum back in the spring. Last week, the town supervisors gathered at something called the Palisades Institute, and everybody talks about affordable housing, but nobody really wants to do anything about it. You know, it's a hard needle to thread, but we're hitting a critical crisis now. In recent coverage, for example, we covered, as we've been covering, the Rockland Country Day School. Architect Mike Shillelagh was hired by the town of Clarkstown to evaluate different options for the campus in Congers that Clarkstown bought a few years ago and has been sitting idle ever since. Originally, the plan did call for some modest senior housing or housing for first responders, but pretty much a cry heard around Congers objecting to any sort of housing has walked back Supervisor George Holman and Mike Graziano, both who, of course, are running for re-election, saying no housing is being contemplated here. We shall see where that goes, once the elections are behind us, and while everybody is calling for parks, open space, and sports fields, again, that is a site that probably makes sense for some sort of affordable housing. Now, we've also recently covered two stories on the developer backing out from buying the land where he was going to build 200 units of housing for the Nanuet TOD, the transit-oriented development. I mean, Clarkstown basically wrote that zoning to accommodate that project. In other words, the larger project, and then even more specifically, amended the zoning to make it attractive for that landowner to sell his land and for a developer to come in and build. And a prospective developer had come to the IDA for a 20-year pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, and everything seemed to be moving forward. And then, lo and behold, for no reason, the developer pulled out. My sources tell me that the family, the Cohn family that owns those parcels, they just keep wanting more and more for it. And in response to that, Paul Adler, the commercial real estate guru here in this county, wrote a column suggesting that in a situation like this, that towns should consider taking that land by eminent domain because it's not reasonable for one property owner to hold up the redevelopment of a TOD that's been in the works for more than a dozen years. If this developer, if the landowner won't accept a fair price and the land just sits fallow, it's done all the time. The town should step in, pay him fair market value, and with the developer himself. I mean, Clarkstown seems to have no problem with purchasing land when it sees fit. The whole purpose of eminent domain is that it's for the greater good. And if a landowner is holding a large parcel hostage in a situation where, that development is needed to really jumpstart affordable housing in a new era for Clarkstown, then that has to be weighed. We also reported on how Clarkstown rewrote its new city hamlet zones to encourage new residential construction in the city's downtown. And just today or yesterday, we put out a piece about the owner of the DeCecco's shopping center and the office building next door on South Main Street submitted plans to the TAP committee to tear down the old Bowtie Cinema building and build a 6-story hotel-style luxury residential building with 1 and 2 apartments. Now, apparently, the allocation for affordable units there might be 7 or 8, but that will also be, very high-end, certainly not fitting the definition of affordable housing, not coming anywhere close to that. So, although some say that every addition to the stock available of housing has an impact, it just seems impossible for anyone to build starter homes here in Rockland County, and this this is, I would say, county-wide. Perhaps the land is too expensive, the construction costs are high, there's red tape, soft costs, or perhaps there's just, perhaps the leaders of this county find it expedient to keep using the word affordable housing, but they know and behind the scenes, acknowledge, excuse me, that there's not really the appetite for it. And they, and so we're sort of in this lockstep where we're not really seeing any sort of affordable housing. The last site I would point to is in Clarkstown, the Grace Baptist Church. So Clarkstown, we just reported that they got, I think it was about a little under $500,000 grant to tear down the old Baptist church. That land actually is now part of the Nanuet TOD. Same thing, same conversation, which is, will that site, become suitable for actually to have affordable housing? The town owns that site too, so in that case, they have more control. We shall see, where all this goes, but there really is a dire need for affordable housing, and we also put out, really just reprinted a report from Patterns of Progress that was put out last week, and that shows the dire situation in terms of what people can afford and the rental market, and just essentially how it is going to be impossible for younger people, millennials, people of certain income to be able to afford to live here. So, slow creeping problem, easy to talk about, but very hard to do something. Well, maybe it's not so hard to do something about it, but the political will has to be there. And so that's the question that I leave Rockland County with.
It's an unfortunate need that is obviously there. Of course, we do appreciate your coverage of it. A lot going on in Clarkstown in regards to that. Do you think there is a particular area in the county where it is most likely to be established, that there may be a spot for affordable housing at some point, or do you think it's going to be a long way off before we see any sign of any town being open to the idea, or at least having the political will, as you put it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would put some hope on the village of Haverstraw, but I see a rejection of it largely all around the rest of the county, and it's going to have an impact, and I think that people just don't understand the nuances of it. People just want things the way they are, and I think we're very stuck in a suburban mold that's been pretty much going on for 70 years, and it's complicated. I mean, you can't. When time stands still, it has a consequence. So we'll have to see. But I don't see any movement on this front, and it really is a storm that's gathering clouds. So we'll have to see what happens. I wanted to just end my session today by. There are just a few things that I did want to say about Rockland Green taking over Hightour last week and tossing Hightour out without only a few hours' notice. And what I want to say has nothing to do with the animals or who's going to take care of the animals. This is about government accountability. And I really want to stress to the people of Rockland County that they should be worried about Rockland Green. I have read the contract between Rockland Green and Hightour, and yes, termination was an option for that contract, that 2-year contract, but it required cause, and it required a 30-day notice and a 60-day opportunity to cure any conditions that led to the so-called or alleged breach. Rockland Green gave some reasons for terminating, including a virus attack that happened in the summer, that, by the way, is not unusual in animal shelters at all, and that was cured long ago, and some vague allegations about staffing even though the ASPCA has recently issued a report saying that Hightower was properly staffed. It tossed out Hightower without any notice, without any opportunity to cure the so-called breach. And Brett Yeagle, the executive director, and the former executive director, both say that Rockland Green has acted illegally and has breached their end of the contract. Mm-hmm. Also, because I have seen the contract, and it is available to anybody, the contract said that everything in Hightower belonged to Hightower: the cages, the furniture, computers, supplies, medical equipment, everything. But when Rockland Green decided to put the lock on the door, it kept everything that Hightower owned. I mean, basically stole what Hightower owns. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that Hightower will go to court to deal with this egregious wrongdoing.
That was going to be my next question, was do you think there'll be a lawsuit?
Well, I can't logically believe that there wouldn't be, except that to some degree, the folks of the board president, Kim Von Heim, and Gary Kogut were kind of complicit. They thought that, Rockland Green was going to be on their side, and sort of they got played. But that's another story for another day. Mm-hmm. Rockland Green is led by Howard Phillips, but it is a body that is made up by 17 elected officials, including every supervisor, 2 mayors, and a handful of legislators. All of those elected officials voted. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they haven't read the contract, because if they had, and if they had any integrity, they would have questioned the ability for Rockland Green to simply switch things up, not to mention have fired more than a dozen people who had an income coming from Hightower, and put the lock on the door and say those employees are done and terminated. I have never seen anything so rogue and so cowboy, even in Rockland County. And I spent a long time covering New Jersey in my younger reporting days. I've truly never seen anything like this. It is absolutely staggering. It is utterly concerning. And people should, look, a while ago we put out a story about Rockland Green and tried to explain to the community that they're a public authority, that that their powers are largely unchecked, and that they have an open checkbook. Okay, and this is the organization, that ultimately wants to build a $20 million plus shelter and stock it with, I guess, whomever they want. So, Rockland County, take notice that you've got an agency that is essentially operating in a rogue and illegal manner, and it's going to count. So
tell us how you really feel. No, I'm kidding. It's strong stuff, obviously, but I do see where you're coming from there. And if people listening right now, just before you go, because we do have a paid program coming up, so we do have to let you go. But before we go, if people want to access the details of the contract, where can they do so?
You know what? They can get in touch with us here at Rockland County Business Journal, because if Rockland Green, and now there's a new contract in place. Okay, right. So those things are foilable. You should be able to foil Rockland Green to be able to see what they're doing. They're a public agency, and they run on taxpayer dollars. But if anybody does have trouble at least getting a hold of the original contract to see this miscarriage of justice, we're happy to. Actually, if there's a desire, we'll post it on our site.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Tina Traster of the Rockland County Business Journal. Find her website, rcbizjournal.com, or you can check them out on Facebook or Twitter. Have a great week. We will speak to you next Monday, Tina.